Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Oh my gosh. Good evening again. Welcome to the second installment of Her Story in the Making Behind the Curtain of Black Women of Color Leaders and the Sacrifices of Building Power. Just wanted to check in and make sure all the panelists have been able to locate the live for tonight and have shared it on their personal pages.
Yes.
Yes, thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you so much. So, before we begin, I wanted to make sure we enter into the space today to give um, room for the grieving that is happening in our country. There is a lot of grieving happening. Um, from things happening with Breonna Taylor's mother to what's happening in George Floyd's case to what happened in Atlanta just last night to the just egregious strategies taking place to limit voting rights across 43 states for Black folks and people of color because we dared to show out in mass for this past election. There's a lot going on. And I just wanted to call people in to this space tonight to just release whatever you need to release. And I want everybody that's watching to share this on your personal pages because I want as many BIPOC persons, non-binary persons, trans persons, like women to come into this space to uplift one another tonight. I want you to know that you are loved. Your life is worth protecting. Your story is worth sharing. Um, I want you to know that your humanity is worth it. I want you to know that even though you may not be able to come out of the shadows, there are people fighting for you. There are people on the front lines for you. That nobody is on the job sleeping. Like people are getting out, people are sharing, people are here. We have endured pains of this nature for centuries. Um, the stain of white supremacy has just really just broken apart the beautiful things about living, has really broken down the joy of waking up every day because you wake up to trauma every day. You know, you wake up to trauma in your neighborhoods, you wake up to trauma on the news, you wake up to trauma in your home, you wake up to trauma in the workplace. And so I just wanted to give space and acknowledge that we're here for you. You know, this isn't, you know, this series, Her Story in the Making, isn't just about talking about the issues. Like we want to find the solutions to these issues. We want to make sure that people know they are not alone because oftentimes when we are struggling through these things of holding on to our humanity, of fighting for other people, of being a mother, being a leader, being a teacher, being a whoever, you know, there's so much struggle that comes with that. And you feel isolated, you feel alone. Well, I want to let you know tonight that you're not alone. And we will win, you know, essentially what this is. So again, good evening. Welcome to the second installment of Her Story in the Making. I want to welcome our beautiful guest, amazing guest. First, I'm going to welcome Pat Tucker with us. I was put in contact with Pat through Carmen Curate. And thank you, Carmen, just at the top from CTU Foundation. She is always uplifting women. How do I make this work for you? How do I, you know, platform the voice? How do I platform the issue? How do I make room for you? So super excited that Carmen saw fit to not only support this endeavor, but introduce me to phenomenal people like Pat Tucker. So thank you so much, Pat, for joining tonight.
Thank you. Glad to
um,
be here.
also, thank you. I also want to introduce back to the scene, no stranger to this segment, Michelle Morales. Thank you for coming back. You was with us on the radio segment. I mean, you dropped some wisdom. It was like, oh, fire tea, everything. And so I thank you for coming back into this space with
Thank
us
you for
tonight
inviting
to
me.
share more of your wisdom.
Thank you.
And we have with us Sierra Bates Chamberlain. I met this young lady, I think last summer doing the panorama when it was first kicking off. That's what doing, when it was in the middle of the pandemic. And we were doing a mutual aid drive, I believe, on the south side of Inglewood. I think it was Inglewood. And she was there, and that's when I met her. And I'm so happy to have you here, Executive Director of Live Free Illinois, doing amazing work, faith-based organizing. So glad to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And last but not least, somebody who just dropped a bomb on me before we went live, Miss Candace Castillo. Let me get your new title right. What is this? Political
We can stick with the old one for now. We can stick with the current one for now. How you doing tonight? I'm glad to be here.
Hey, girl, hey. I'm so excited to have you here with us tonight, Candace. I really felt like it was important to have you. We did the radio show with you. I mean, you had some really good nuggets, and I was like, I got to bring Candace back. I got to bring Candace back to expound upon like what it looks like with this in the political realm with the sacrifices of building power. And so I want everyone here tonight to know that the women, the people that we have brought here tonight, they sit in philanthropy, politics, and organize within disenfranchised communities. In our first panel segment, we heard real life testimony of what Black and other women of color leaders struggle with on the job, and how we all wanted to see more opportunities and resources to create positive change. And so these last two segments, including this one, one of which is right now, we want to focus on correcting course, so to speak. It's one thing to hear the trauma, to hear the issues, but it's like, okay, how do we turn the page, turn the chapter, get into a new book all together? And so these last two segments are definitely focusing on turning the page, so that persons in leadership, especially Black folks and women, non-binary people of color, have the opportunities and the support that they need. And essentially what we're talking about is moving from transaction to transformation. What does that look like for people of color in leadership, to go into a space that took and asked and demanded a lot of us, and actually gave us the support and the resources, the space to lead, to be our whole selves, not be ashamed of anything, not hide anything, not silence anything. So what does that look like? And so I wanted to start off by giving each panelist just a couple minutes apiece to just give the audience a quick spiel about where you sit in your position and what you want people to know when they leave tonight. I want to start off with Sierra.
Thank you. So again, I am Reverend Sierra Bakes Chamberlain. I am the Executive Director of Live Free Illinois. We organize Black churches across the state. However, we're in 4 regions, specifically in Rockford, the South Suburb, Chicago, and the Metro East area. And we're organizing to address all forms of violence against Black people, and more specifically around incarceration, um, gun violence, and police violence. And if I could, what I would love for people to just walk away with is that there is a rise of Black women in the Black church that is building an incredible amount of independent Black political power. And so and that is what we are cultivating and investing in the leadership of Black women as we build the capacity of the Black church.
Thank you so much, Sierra. I want to go with Pat next.
Hi. I'm Pat Tucker. I work. I'm basically a consultant. I work um all around the country, and I work in the field of behavioral health, substance use. I'm out there trying to help agencies and people deal with people who are homeless or people who are in danger of being homeless. But that takes into account a whole lot of other issues, because we're not just dealing with people without housing, we're dealing with people without good physical health care. We're dealing with people without good mental health care, um, people who have been subjected to all of the different systems that keep holding them back, and trying to fight against that to help people get back on their feet and be a part of society and be a part of at the table, as opposed to being left out from the table. Because my belief is that if you're not at the table, you might be on the menu, and we don't want people to be on the menu. We want people to be at the table. So my goal is trying to get people at the table. Um, and the thing that I would like for people to uh, leave here with is that we can do a lot individually, but we have to get together to work together to deal with the systemic issues. It's not
Right.
just about all of our individual work. It's when you're doing great work, it's kind of like swimming up tide when you're working against the system. And I'll leave it there for right now.
Thank you so much, Pat. I'm going to pass it to Michelle Morales next. Again, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm Michelle Morales. I'm the president of Woods Fund Chicago. We're one of 6 or 7 foundations in Chicago that funds community-based organizing and public policy advocacy. It's actually a sector that I'm sure those on the panel today know very well is a very underfunded sector. I think it receives about 4% of all funding in Chicago. And so we're deeply passionate about helping to build sustainability in the sector, supporting the sector, and working and striving that our funding is not creating barriers, but is creating space, right, for innovation and for the creativity, for the beautiful innovation and creativity that exists in Chicago's organizing sector, and to help support the resistance moving forward. Personally and professionally, I'm deeply passionate about internal infrastructure of organizations. I'm an operations nerd, and I love thinking about rebuilding organizations that support people of color and support women of color, which I'm sure will come up in today's panel, are far and few between. So many times the organizational infrastructure works against the women of color and non-binary folks of color at organizations that are rarely centered in organizational infrastructure. So that's a big passion point of mine, and we've been doing a lot of the internal work at the foundation since I started in November of 2019.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Last but not least, Candace, once again. Um, just introduce yourself to the audience, what you want them to leave off with when they leave here.
Hi, my name is Candace. I am currently the chief of staff to the most radical Black woman in the Chicago City Council. I'm chief of staff to Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor. I do a host of other things in my spare time. A lot of people don't realize that the 20th ward comprises Woodlawn, Inglewood, Backyards, New City, Greater Grand Crossing. The shooting that just happened in Chicago was in our ward. The Obama Center will be across the street from our ward. And we have a population that's 14% Latinx, right? So people do not understand, even within our communities, that we have more in common than we have that separates us, right? And it's trying to dig to get to those issues that we have in common. If I want to leave anybody with anything tonight, is that colonialism is a hell of a drug. And if we're going to tear down the walls of white male patriarchy and white supremacy in all of these sectors, then we have to understand that colonialism is a hell of a drug.
Thank you, Candace. Like, I think that's I don't want to say a mantra we need to like remind ourselves of so we don't become like willfully ignorant to what's actually at play here. But like, remember that like people are drunk off of that, are injected it into every piece of society. Our people are strung off on it, and it has destroyed, you know, it has destroyed tribes, it has destroyed communities, it has destroyed businesses, it's destroyed everything. It's destroyed everything. And so as somebody that decides, because this is a decision, when I was in college, I didn't see, you know, political organizing and stuff on the agenda, things I can get into. This is kind of one of those you get awaken to like issues, and you choose to come into this space to fix it, to be on the front lines for people. And so knowing that colonialism is a hell of a drug, and choosing to come into this space, it takes a lot to combat everything flying at you and still stay true to why you do this, because you can get so tired and be like, I'm gonna start playing that game and be in it for myself and just do me, you know. And it takes a lot to stay true to this, and to keep going. And you know, today, you know, like I said, we're going to be talking about what it looks like to move from transaction to transformational building as people of color, like in these leadership spaces, as women of color in these leadership spaces, and what that looks like internally. Like last week we talked about how oftentimes we're fighting the systems out there, you know. We're fighting against, you know, reproductive justice and mass incarceration and like all these things, but internally, a lot of times those systems seep into the crevices in the movement space and in organizing and in politics and in building, and we start to mirror those symptoms that we're fighting against. So what does it look like to remove that from the inside and to have transformative justice for your own self, for your staff, for your community, to fight for that, to not be silenced for that? Um, and I'm just going to share a little bit just about my experience, you know, with this. And then I definitely I have so many questions for you all, but I think one of the hardest things that I experienced as a Black woman in leadership, in movement space and organizing spaces, was pertaining to having support for mutual aid. You know, we like you said, Pat, like there is so much that people are up against in the homeless community. And oftentimes, like in this space, you get the money and people want numbers and people want results and you know, people want leaders built in XYZ, but I can't force that from someone that's hungry, that's homeless, whose child just been shot, who XYZ, like that trauma. I can't bring someone to a place to see the possibilities when the oppression is so heavy. And so I was really fighting for mutual aid to be a part of our organizing model. And I got a lot of times like, what does it matter if we feed people? What does it matter if we pay their rent? They should just want to like self-actualize and magically want to change the world. And I was like, that sounds a lot like the teachings of what we're fighting against, that our human dignity doesn't matter first, that investment in us doesn't matter first, only what you can get from us matters. And it made me really think about how we see marginalized communities once we get to this space, how we interact with them, how we invest with them, how we pour funding into investment versus getting out the vote, versus stomping for a particular campaign and door knocking and call. Are we as committed to transforming our people's lives and feeding them and getting them the resources they need so they have 5 minutes in space to figure out how to liberate themselves and speak up for themselves? And I feel like that's a stain of white supremacy when it comes to that type of organizing model. And there's so many different cases of this where those things have seeped in. And so I want to talk to you about like where you all sit in this power dynamic, because we're talking about building power and the sacrifices of that and what you want to see happen, like what you need to see happen. So I want to address you first, Michelle, um, because it's what's fun. What's fun is amazing. I will say this: when I had you as a funder, you were brilliant. Just Wood Fund in general. It wasn't a call of, where's so and so report. It
Mhm.
was a call of, are you breathing today? No, seriously, you can tell us. It was a legit check-in. Like, how's your humanity today? Where are the gaps that you're facing today?
Mhm.
Let's see how we can figure this out. And that type of relationship building
Mhm.
with leaders of color isn't the norm. And I want it to be the norm. And so I guess my questions to you, Michelle, um, last year we saw a pause, philanthropy take a pause and say, how do we do this right? Is it too much reporting? Is it too much this? Are we not funding, the movement like we should? And so we saw philanthropy take a pause to look at how it can really address system changes. And so my question for you is philanthropy doing enough? And with that question in mind, why has money like philanthropy been, and I'm gonna say, been not necessarily directed at you, but why has philanthropy been in a lot of ways one of those pillars of toxic white supremacy and
Mhm.
patriarchal power,
Mhm.
in movement spaces? And how are you as a woman of color who was at, because what we said last week is we are the table. That's what we took home last week. We are the table. So you bringing your own table to this space, Michelle. So how are you showing up as a woman of color, knowing all of these dynamics? What are you doing to change the scene?
Ooh, all right. Lots to answer there. So,
Sorry.
uh, no, it's all good. I think philanthropy can always do more, period. Right. So even what we saw as a response to the pandemic, the question and the fight is internally in the sector to continue advocating to make sure those changes stay in place. Because very quickly, once we enter into a post-pandemic world, there is talk of folks going back to reports and back to applications and all of those things. So philanthropy can always do more. We can do more at Woods Fund. We have been examining our own grant making processes. I religiously follow the blog Nonprofit AF, and they just put out a checklist of equitable grant making, and we checked it off, and we're not all threes. There's a lot of twos and ones that we checked off, that we have a lot of work to do in our own foundation to make sure that our grant making is as equitable as possible. There's always the question of payout, right? Increasing payout, putting more money out there, reducing the barriers to getting the money, reducing the reporting, reducing really just trusting people to do the work. And that's, I think, the ongoing conversations and struggles within the sector to really push the sector in its entirety to adopt not only equitable grant making, but to center racial justice in its grant making, which is still, Chicago philanthropy is still dipping its toe in centering racial justice in grant making. So part of the work that we try to do at the foundation, that I try to do, is to advocate always on behalf of the organizing sector in Chicago, to make sure that organizers are at the tables, because they often are not. To make sure that those stories that we're hearing when we're checking in with our partners are being brought forward in many decision-making tables that we're privileged to sit at. But there's still a lot of work to do to make sure that, and as I mentioned, starting with my introduction, I'm passionate about the organizing sector, and it's the most underfunded sector out of all the sectors, right? And it's work that, you said it so eloquently, Deborah, we fund it during certain times, like, oh, we got to get the vote out, fund organizing. Oh, we got redistricting's coming up, fund organizing. not the funding to keep the sector sustainable, to increase quality of life, to really have the sector be vibrant, and where the people who are passionate and committed organizers can actually live well, right? Be healthy. And those are the things that we're examining as a foundation to try to figure out what can we do to create even more space in the sector by supporting the sustainability of the sector.
I thank you for answering that. And hearing you, sometimes you need to just hear stuff out loud to, the sky's blue. I need to hear it out loud sometimes. And so when I hear you say, like, reiterating, like, organizing is the most underfunded, space in this, it really makes me question, so what's all this winning we talking about?
Mhm.
Where did that come from? Because you can't win on a $50. I mean, you can't win only part-time in this thing. You can't win
Mhm.
and build sustainability and build power.
Yep.
Without, you gotta, either you pregnant or you not. That's the best way. Either we want to win or we don't.
Right.
So when we take these half measures,
Either we're really committed to undoing systemic racism or we're not.
right. And that, if we can sit, then the other side of this thing can see it. That's the thing. Like, they ain't just sitting over here not paying attention to the wishy-washiness of this space.
Mm-hmm.
Because they will, as we have seen, they will eat themselves to get to where they want to be. We see how Republican people deny their folks money, deny them health care, don't want to give them stimulus checks, don't care if women have like repeated violence thrown against them. They don't care. They will eat themselves to keep themselves in power.
But also, right, foundations who lean right, those right conservative think tanks, those right leaning, conservative leaning foundations, those are the practices that foundations like Woods Fund and others need to follow. They fund for the long haul. They fund 50C3 work, 504 work, C4 and C3 work. They fund think tanks. They fund leadership programs, they do it, media, communications, you name it, they fund it. So that they're entrenching those narratives, right, in the mainstream. And while those funders, that are progressive, we're piecemealing what we fund.
And it's by choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's by choice. And so it's like, the buck got to stop somewhere. Who does it stop with? Because at the end of the day, like, what's the point? Like, too many people have given their lives, have lost their lives, have given up everything to serve, to do this. But yet there are pockets that don't give unto that. And so it's like, I don't want you to become my enemy in this, because this is our livelihoods at stake. And it's like, I need for there to be more accomplices in our liberation. And being an accomplice means you are planning for the long haul for our liberation. So with that, I want to move on to Sierra, to really look at, what she's facing, what she's seeing in faith-based organizing, across the state. And how have these things shown up? Like, what biases have you had to work on removing, helping other people remove as well, in order to really see people's lives and experiences and uplift those, respect them, like humanize them. And how are you, as a Black woman with the foundation of faith, using that to really turn people in the right direction when it comes to moving from transaction to transformation and changing lives?
Thank you. So I'll try to go in order in the questions. And one, I before I start, I really want to lay out the importance and the power that's in the Black church. The Black church is very political, has always been politicized. I'm actually doing a thesis on J.H. Jackson, who was once called the president of the Negroes. back in the 60s. But he was also a pastor in Chicago. And he was really, I believe that he helped to form how the Black church organized in the city. And so although arguably people may argue this, I do believe that the Black church is the most powerful um, organization in Black communities, being that the money is Black, the board is Black, and the members are Black. So I wanted to lay that out as I really began to talk about some of my work in the faith-based community. But it's still important in our politics as we think about how we're building Black independent political power. I will say this as far as my own biases. I definitely think that the same thing that I had to work through is the same thing that I also have to help people work through when we're thinking about reimagining public safety, gun violence, decarceration. And I think that's how we view ourselves, how we've internalized whiteness, how we've internalized their narrative. Um, some of the biases may look like that I had to overcome and that I see is that I'm from the South Side of Chicago. I was raised by my grandmother, and a lot of times, you know, when you're raised by your grandmother, it's for a reason that you live with your grandmother and not with your mom. So I didn't necessarily come from this perfect background. So I think sometimes we have to rid ourselves of this space and like really come to this realization that we're an exception and not the rule. And so that's the piece. And in addition to how we see ourselves, meaning how it's so easy to replicate whiteness, meaning that we create these hierarchies or we create these circles and saying this is them and this is me. And so I had to break that down. And so a lot of the organizing work starts with us healing ourselves and working through our own bull crap so that we're not bleeding and being a part of that circle. When we say hurt people, it's not just with folks in gun violence, that's folks in organizing too. So I think that's a huge piece of removing some of those biases where we're organizing in faith communities to say that if we do believe that we're many members in one body, that if a member in Inglewood or a member in South Shore or a member in Rockford is hurting, that means that the entire body is hurting. And now I speak as a body of the body of the Black community. I also I think that has helped me to do the work again in myself and to help others to do the work so that we're not tokenizing people, because when it's a us thing and not a them thing, it's not about tokenizing the formerly incarcerated person. It's saying like, no, that's my brother, or that's saying that it could have been me if you knew my background. And I think that the other piece is how am I using my voice as a Black woman in this space to shift things. I believe that one, definitely my faith. I'm gonna always profess that. I believe that it's definitely a calling for me to preach this gospel and to go out to the poor and to do what I'm called to do, meaning to work with marginalized and oppressed communities. And I think that in doing so is about activating and engaging our churches to do the same, being that we are already politicized. Is about making sure that we're standing on the side of justice. And we do have this unique role in the faith community. And I think more importantly for me is that we're doing this through the context of, or doing this through the lens of a Black womanist approach. Because for so long, Black women have led this movement, and oftentimes when it's time to speak, we got to give the mic over to a man when it's time for us to share our intellect. And so we even launched the Prophetess of the Resistance because they have the Prophets of the Resistance, and we're saying, no, we're doing the work, we're organizing the people, so we're going to amplify the voices of these women, and we're not going to allow you to put her to the back while you stand in the pulpit. So that's also a part of our work, because it's a part of, as we're deconstructing whiteness, we have to deconstruct how we replicated it in the church. And oftentimes that looks like it's our men creating those hierarchies that subject women as the lesser power. So that's the work that I'm doing to try to dismantle. As we're dismantling whiteness, we're dismantling patriarchy and the
Yeah.
reputation of whiteness in our congregations.
Thank you, Sierra. And I resonate so much with you. My journey from a conservative evangelical Black woman has been real deep to over here. So I can tell you a couple stories, but we ain't got enough time. But I completely understand where you're coming from and how like much of a fight that is, because it's a fight for me, because those same doctrines that I was oppressed by, I then began to oppress others. And now that I'm on the other side of that, I see even more so how that is weaponized on the other side, that has created so much evil in this country. And it's like a battle. You know, it's a super battle. Like, how do you build power to tell the truth and to care for folks? When that same quote unquote like religious institution has said the thing, but they ain't doing the thing in a lot of ways, in too many ways. Especially when it comes to like whiteness and, you know, toxicity and destruction and like just so many things, just from the evangelical lens. But I want to go on to Pat, with the work that you do. I remember our first call with you, and I can't wait for Candace to jump in, because I just feel like she I feel like Candace, like I feel like where Candace sits, she like looks at the landscape. And she's like, so this fruit basket, right? How do we make the best smoothie, build the most power with this fruit basket, like make it make sense? She one of the people behind the scenes that organizes the puzzle pieces. But Pat, when you and I were talking, you know, we were talking about, you know, the gender bias that comes with the homeless, and, you know, the white toxicity that comes with serving the homeless, and them only being used to serve for selfish purposes and not like their wholeness being respected. Can you talk to me about that, and just one or two specific ways that you are not only fighting against that, but you are trying to build up a different model?
Well, I want to say, and I want to start off by talking about how I see um, this whole fight in the community. And I say community, that means I'm a part of it. Um, it's like there's a pie. We have a whole pie on the table. Make it whatever kind of pie you like. And for some reason, that pie, 90% of that pie is owned by whites and males. And 10% is owned by the women and people of color. And we fight within it for that 10% of that pie. We are fighting each other for every crumb, instead of saying, wait a minute, this pie, there's 90% out there. Why aren't we trying to get a bigger piece?
You better preach, Pat.
And that really, that we got to stop that. We got to stop fighting over that small piece of the pie, because we're fighting with each other as opposed to fighting for more of that pie. If we really want to change things, we got to start working together. We got to start getting over these little petty differences. You know, I come at this, I'm a Black lesbian. So you know, I've had the fight. I've had the fight on the race side. I've had the fight on the sexuality side. And when you have to keep fighting every day and keep proving that you deserve as much as the next person, it wears on you. It takes a lot of energy. And one of the things that that I'm trying to do is not just help people, but look at these systems and try to help those systems to take a look at themselves, and realize that they are not necessarily always helping. And I'll give you one for instance. A lot of people in the Black and brown communities need mental health counseling.
Mhm.
We do not have a lot of people of color working in the mental health field. So who do you think you're going to see when you need to talk to somebody about your problems? You're going to see a person who has no clue of where you come from, no clue of what you've been through. I mean, I was raised by my mother and my grandmother. I lived with both. So you talk about having fun. Try being in the household where your mom says one thing and your grandmother overrules her because she's the mom of the house. I I talking to some of my coworkers, they have no clue of what that's like or what that feels like to come out of that environment. So, just trying to get systems that are supposed to be helping to try to look at themselves and realize that on one hand they're trying to help, but on the other hand, it's still the same racist system where people are saying, well, that black dude, I knew he didn't want housing because if he really wanted housing, he would be here on time. He would respect me. He would do all these things to prove he wanted it. And it's like they have some ownership of that housing, and they don't. That housing is supposed to be there for people who want it and need it. And we get in the way of doing that job. And so I think that when we look at this, we have to look at it from multiple viewpoints. We have to look at ourselves. What are we
Right.
contributing to this? We
Right.
also have to look at the systems and realize that those systems are not perfect, that a lot of those systems are still hurting people of color
Uh-huh.
because
So it sounds
those,
like,
go ahead.
go ahead. No, it just sounds like, how do we get out of the way? Like
Uh,
between you, Michelle, Sierra, how do we get out of the way? Or not necessarily, us.
well,
Let's try to
well,
have sense.
w-
The systems, the toxicity, the how do we get out of the way so we get to that other side?
well,
How do these systems
I think
themselves?
first we got to stop fighting over that small part of the pie and start demanding more and start, putting out demands. We should not feel like we have to be grateful for that 1/10 of the pie. We need to say, wait, we need a bigger piece of pie because this is not enough. And once we start demanding more and start holding each other up and get out of that rat race where we're fighting each other. Like I watch black organizations fight for those dollars that are coming through the government. They'll tear each other down to get that money to keep their programs going, as opposed to saying, wait a minute, how can we work together? Let's see how we can do this together. Maybe we can partner. You need this, I need this. Let's go for that money. Let's make it work, as opposed to fighting each other to just it's fighting each other just to maintain the the status quo. We're not trying to fight to move forward. We're just fighting
Right.
to keep what we have.
Right. And the cost of freedom is everything. You
Absolutely.
gotta go, you gonna go big, or you gonna go home. Like
Ab- absolutely.
where are we in this thing? Like,
Hmm.
where are we in this thing? And that's why I was like, when you put everything out in the front, like it forces people to look at the big picture.
Hmm.
It's like, do we want to win or do we want to keep losing? Do we want to cross the finish line to liberation, or are we cool in this rat race and chasing our tails? And so what do we want?
Well, and that
Why are
that
you?
that whole winning thing, that's really not winning. That's being told that you're winning so you can stop trying harder to get a bigger piece of the pie. That's a let's keep you in your place and say, "Oh yeah, you're winning. Things are getting better." They're not. And it's just to get us to sit back and stop stop pushing, stop asking for more.
That's right. Because how are we back here in the year of our Lord 2021 fighting for voting rights all over again?
Exactly.
And with that, I'm gonna give it to Candace. I'm gonna give it to Candace because you've been listening, and thank you for coming tonight. Um, I'm so glad you're here. You have this thing on your page where you asking people, what did you think when they first met you? And I was like, she's deep down to earth, but I love her brand of shade. I love it. I love her brand of shade. So with that, I'm gonna give it to you, Candace. Like, I just really want to know, like, what's your thoughts on all of this as you are someone that is working to build and also curate spaces for Black women, women of color, non-binary persons to excel and to help their communities and to be in those positions of power where they can make those moves necessary that will benefit generations to come. Like, how are you sitting in all of this? Where do you see all this going?
First of all, y'all just preached a whole sermon and a half. Next Sunday and Wednesday, I am now free because I ain't gotta go.
Doors of the church are now open.
Doors of the church are now open. You can come by Colonialized Experience. So, okay. So as I sit here and y'all started it, so I can go down this road. There are too many Black and brown people who are looking at Jericho and forget that they are on the road to Jericho. Period.
Ooh! Hold on. I need scripture and verse chapter.
There was
Say it again. Say it again, Candace.
People forget that they are on the road to Jericho and not in Jericho. What do I mean? There were homeless people. There was lepers. Hey, if you know what I'm talking about, Jericho looked a lot like O-Block, right? A lot of homeless people, drug dealers, gangbangers, gangsters, all of that. We are organizing on the road to Jericho. And guess what? Everybody, we are saying that there is room in Jericho for everybody. The organizers on the ground, we helping the lepers. We helping the people that's hungry. We helping the people, the gangbangers, the guys who belong to street fraternities and women that belong to street sororities. We are helping these people, right? And funders like the Woods Foundation is like, yeah, but we need that guy elected in Jericho. So let's stop this drug program. Let's stop this housing program. Let's put this housing program only on the north side of Jericho and not the south or west side where the people on the road to Jericho be at. We have to remember where we are and what we are doing. We have to remember where we are and what we are doing. And I know we left a lot of space for feelings today. And I gotta say, one of the women that have had my back in this political space since I was still in the union organizing space is a woman of Chinese descent. Mm-hmm. So I am in a space where all I can hear in everything everybody is saying is our communities and organizations wanting the proximity to whiteness.
Oh, that's thank you for repeating it. Thank you.
And us being, and Pat said it, if we do not tear down the white patriarchal structures, as Sierra said it, pause. That does not mean emasculating men. That does not mean a man isn't a man and king is castle or whatever. It does not mean anything like that. It means not getting mad at the person who is not from your community that owns Dunkin' Donuts in the community, but being mad at Dunkin' Donuts that they're not selling to Black and brown people in your community. That's what that means. So, okay, in my space, in my political and organizing space, mm-hmm. So I tell everybody I hit 35 and I turned into the cranky old person that says, get off my lawn, like you're trampling my grass. I'm that person, but I'm also one of the oldest people at 38 years old that works in my aldermanic office because I believe in young people. And I think a lot of times we think of organizing and boots on the ground as, oh, I'm this, I'm that. Every movement has been arranged by young people, period. Martin Luther King was gone by the time he was 39. So was Malcolm X. Like, they were out and they were old news by the time they got killed at 38 and 39 years old, respectively. Medgar Evers. Even, if we go to the civil rights movement, and even the movements before, the Black Panther Party, they were 19. Fred Hampton was 21 when he died. We must stop. We must start mentoring differently.
Yes.
We must put our 20, 21, 19-year-olds in a position of power. So once we go to the next plateau, they can take over where we are. So like in my head, I am grooming I am helping to groom the next older person of the 20th ward. Why? Because that needs to happen now.
Right.
That investment in our young women need to happen now. I do it with my son now. Everybody says everything starts at home first. I also grew up in the house with my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt, right? I had three. My mama said no, my grandmother or my aunt was gonna say yes, period. But I also know that those lessons of dismantling the patriarchy starts at home.
Yep.
And it starts with me having discussions with my son's friends on why that's not funny or why it's not okay to call people slurs or why you go to different certain places and you're saying that, or some kid said to me, Miss Candace, I don't eat yang food. Like that was okay. We need to stop that from a young age and in our young people, in our organizing spaces, correct that. Also, this whole wait your turn strategy.
Come on, let's get that on out the way.
So I'm on the advisory council for Black Bench Chicago. We got a lot of young people. We got a lot of people my age. But it's like, well, I have to wait until they don't run for office. No, you have to raise money so you can do it now. What happened in 1985 and moving, or 95, when a lot of these people were elected, the world was much different. Pepe Le Pew was still on TV. Like, the world was different and we live in a different age and people's lens are in different realms. Now, I can try to explain WAP to my grandmother. I did. It was a hilarious conversation. I am so upset I did not tape it. But her lens is always going to be different. We got to let our young people's lenses shine. And I hope that they realize in funding, in organizing, in preaching, in their communities that they ain't in Jericho. Jericho ain't the prize. It's taking care of us who are on the road to Jericho. I don't know if I'll ever get to Jericho because I'm too busy being on the road.
I mean, but if somebody on the road, like Moses ain't make it to the promised land, Jacob did. So it's like the song is somebody get over there. Joshua, whoever, Joshua, as long as somebody get over there, like your work is done. You added to that journey, to that next step, to that next milestone. It was a step by step. You did.
It's your people getting there. It's not you getting there. It's your people getting there.
It is. I want to ask you, like, what would be, you see this fruit basket of all these people doing these things, from philanthropy to organizing to think tanking and all this stuff, policy building. What would be your dream, like 5-point plan? Let's keep it at 5, because I know you could probably go to 100, because we really need one that's consistent. But what would be like your top 5 things to really make the road to Jericho matter, so that the next generations can cross over? Like, what needs to happen in all these lanes? Because what I tell people, this is not a sprint that you run by yourself. This is a relay race. So you gonna have to pass and pass and pass. Everybody got a leg to run. Nobody runs a relay by themselves. You put certain people at the beginning, certain people at the end, certain people in the middle. So it's like, what's that plan? What are those lanes that you would like for people to really focus on, so that we can change these internal systems and also transform our external systems to actually get somewhere?
You ain't send me this question.
I did. I didn't. I feel like this is a very candid combo. I want fresh thoughts. So I'm sorry. I love you.
So I think that we have started doing some of that with the people that are hosting this tonight, Chicago Teachers Union Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, I am starting to believe in radical Black love as a theory of change and defeating white supremacy.
You better say that. I like
so that. It's not that we can't call anybody out. It's not that we can't shout anybody down. It's that there's some people that we should be calling in instead of calling out. And there's some people that we should say, we love you, but you need to move to the side. CTU Foundation has a lot of programs that are helping young Black people in the trades, just getting through school, making it to college. We need to make sure they're funded. And because it's putting those type of ideas at the ground level into children. I believe if y'all haven't watched the last episode of Small Acts, when Caribbean people in England they made homeschools on the weekends for their kids because their kids weren't getting what they should have been getting in the public schools. CTU Foundation is doing that without doing that. So we must give our kids the basis to be change agents. We still need to be fighting the system. Like, elected school board is still a real thing. Please call your elected officials. That still needs to be happening. But we still need to give our kids the tools to create change, because they are the change. Number one. That's number one. Number two, when Alderman Taylor was running, I literally had somebody, I managed her campaign. I literally had somebody tell me, well, I can't vote for her. Why? I like her, but she didn't go to college and she was a teenage mother. What kind of role model is that? Stop. We need to remove these prejudices and this classism of our people, because classism is tied to colonialism. So I had a conversation the other day with, that's number two, right? We have to remove the classist stereotypes that divide us, because that's a further division. There are some Black folks that believe the white man's ice is colder. We must, number three, we must tell full stories and get to the root of the issue. So I had a young lady from Inglewood on a call tell me, them Latin people, no, that she didn't say that, I'm being nice. Them Hispanics, all them illegal immigrants are moving into Inglewood and they don't have no permits and they don't have this and they don't have that. Stop. And I had to really go through it with her. I said, where were some of the first gentrified neighborhoods out in Chicago? I don't know. Logan Square, Humboldt Park, Lincoln Park, Pilsen. Those were super gentrified neighborhoods. So sometimes people are just trying to stay in Chicago. Well, I didn't know that. You didn't know that because you're listening to your rhetoric in your head and not listening to the whole story. We have to listen to each other's stories. You know what one of the top drinks in Vietnam is? Hennessy. You want to know why? Because they were colonized. Period. We must start listening to other people's stories. If we don't hear other people's stories, then we won't hear our own. What am I on? 4? 4. Jesus.
This is like you said, this is the movement Bible, and me and my girl are currently making it, so this is getting added in there. This is the movement Bible.
We are ands. We are not either ors. We are ands. I'm a Black woman and I'm a brown woman. Period. I'm good enough. My dad was from Belize and I'm Carib, Arawak, and Black. Hello. Just like Pat said, she's lesbian and Black. I don't have to choose. I refuse to choose. And if you force me, I'm going to say, I'm an Afro-Latino. Well, that's not a choice. Okay. I'm a Black Latinx woman. Okay, that's not a choice.
How?
All of it, all of my family descends from Africa and Venezuela. Look, you have to stop saying, we have to stop putting people in these boxes. Somebody told me since Sunday that we should take Candace Owens' side because she's ADOS.
Now
she's a woman of African descent, a descendant of slaves, so we should take her side. No categories for nothing else. That's enough. Number 5, we have to get out the idea of being Black or being brown is enough. It ain't. I can name you some people who are Black and brown and have never been enough for Black and brown communities. They don't even do the work for Black and brown communities. They still operate in a supremacy structure of white supremacy. I don't know, taking CARES Act money and funding the police with it. That is still acting in a structure of white supremacy.
It is.
And I guess I'm gonna give you a number 6.
Girl, come on with the number 6, because
I'm gonna give you a number 6. Take care of yourself. That doesn't mean take a shower. That don't mean have a cocktail. That means if you need to sit in the bed that day, sit in the bed that day. If you need to go, if you got the means to go get a massage, go get a massage. If you just need a day to put on some makeup and walk around the house, do that. Black and brown women, we struggle to take care of ourselves because we're so busy taking care of everybody else.
Yes.
And I tell everybody, I have to make a conscious decision to take my prayers, my crystals, my sage, and my champagne and say, all right, Candace, today we are taking care of Candace. Not Jada, not Granny, not Mama, not Auntie, not Dad, not nobody else. Because I can't be super, I ain't got a cake. High blood pressure and heart disease are real. And we are dying at record rates because we are having brain aneurysms. We are having heart attacks because we have this myth in our head of black girl magic and brown girl magic. I ain't a unicorn and I don't see nobody else on here with no horn.
That's real.
We have to move out of that space. So that's it. I'm done.
This was great, you guys. Good night. You know what? Candace, I like you. I can't wait to see you again in person. I mean, this was like a revival. You know, you have church and regular season, you have revivals, you know, in special seasons. That was a revival of words. And it's all comes down to like really uprooting and getting your shovel and uprooting white supremacy and patriarchy, respectability, politics, self-hate, you know, willful ignorance about your system. Just throw it all out. Throw it out. Sometimes you gotta throw the baby out with the bathwater, especially if we talking about going somewhere. It's like start over, because at this point, just start over. And I thank you for sharing that, and what, you know, I can tell that like those are things that you are grounded in, and you want other people that you are coming in contact with and building up to be grounded in. And it's like all of it's true. All of it's true, from you to Pat to Sierra to Michelle, like all of it's true. And it's like I said in the beginning, and that's why I asked you to go through like your point plan, because at some point, not far in the future, but in the next quarter, what are we doing? What's the next step? When we hear all this, we learn all this, we know all this. We've dwelled on it, we've gone, we've, you know, prayed on it or whatever, you know, whatever. What do we do now? What do we do now? Because if we don't change, like intentionally shift our mindsets, how we speak about things, like you were saying, Candace, our language, our cultural dynamics around this thing, we're gonna keep chasing our tail, and we're gonna keep ending up back here. The fact that like I belong to a cohort where there is trauma, and I'm a part of that trauma. There is real life trauma. We talk about women dying, that's real. Non-binary folks in this work, that's real. We are either leaving physically, like still walking or breathing, or we're leaving because of death, because of the stress of this, the fight of this, the outward oppression, and what's going on the inside. And it's like we have to take care of ourselves, and we have to have systems that take care of us. We have to have systems that see us, not just as a statistic, but I have a name, I have a family, I have medical records, I have dreams, I have tears. Like, see me as a whole person and then proceed accordingly. Don't, you know, consolidate our traumas and oppression. Like, take the time and care to see us. Like you said, we are ands. Like that, like not or, like we are ands. And a lot comes with that. When we talk about intersectionality, like we talk about the ands. And a lot comes with those ands. And then we have the nerve to try and make those ands matter for so many people and ourselves, and build power and build systems and communities where people's livelihoods are respected, where the next generation may not have to fight for their and, you know. But Candace, I thank you for sharing everything you just shared. Is there one last piece of thing? Our final segment is next Thursday, and we're going to be looking at that next step. Like, what does that look like with coalition building, with funding, with campaigns, with building power, building policy, hiring practices, accountability practices on the inside out? What does that look like to uproot all those toxic things that we were taught, and really plan out our road to Jericho? As Candace said, like, what is our road to Jericho? We must have a plan, because we just wandering around in the wilderness at this point, and it's 3,000 years later and we still wandering around. You know. And so, I invite you all to come back for next week. I really do. But what is one thing you all want, people that have tuned in? We're going to share the recording. What do you want them to leave with outside of the precious gems?
I'm jumping in.
Go ahead, Pat.
If we do not realize that we have more power together
Yeah.
and use that power that we have together, we will lose. Because the one thing that this white culture has done is make us fight amongst each other, make us fight against the Hispanic or the Latina X, or fight against
Muslim
the
community.
transgender,
Yeah.
or fight against, I mean, we're fighting against, as opposed to put all of our efforts together and we got something. And we got to realize that we have to put it together to make this work. We cannot say, "Oh, well, that's the blacks fight. We're Latin. We don't have, that's not our fight. Oh, the Chinese, that's their fight. Oh no, the Indians, that's their fight." No, we are in this together, and we have to stick together. And the beauty of what the whites have come up with is having us fight with each other and ignore all the stuff that they're doing to make this system keep us down.
The beautiful disaster.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Michelle. Michelle's like,
I don't think I can add anything else after Candace and Pat. I mean, yeah, it's about solidarity building. It's about working in solidarity. Everything Candace said about intersectionality, and everything. When Pat was talking, all I could think about was how insidious, right, the nonprofit industrial complex is. I fell into that when I used to be a fundraiser for a nonprofit. You quickly fall into, right, the competition, the trying to get money, the fundraising, and how foundations contribute to that. So, everything she was talking about, Candace and Sierra, all I kept thinking of was how much foundations contribute to the fighting, to the lack of narrative around intersectionality, to the nonprofit industrial complex, to all of those things that just continue to create the divisions in our communities. And so y'all just verified it even more for me, and it's the call to action I've got to take back to the sector to keep trying to create change within within the sector to, because Pat, yeah, we're fighting over a small pot, but also who's holding the pot, and we got to give up the pot. And that's a big struggle in the sector to give up that pot. So yeah.
I thank you for sharing that, and I like, if anybody can do it, you, Carmen, people that's holding pots, y'all are already, in that space where you're like, what do I do? Like, you're not ignoring it. You're in this space where you're actively working to change it and change it for the next generation and right now leaders. So I thank you for even holding that, because you got to be willing to hold it, to hold the fault, to hold like all the things, and then be willing to change it. So I appreciate that. Sierra, is there anything you want to leave with people?
Yeah, I do. First of all, I want to just shout out this amazing panel to our beautiful moderator. This was a beautiful conversation. Um, and I want to stick with Candace's point. I don't know which one it was, but it was the radical love. And as I was thinking through this and also going through the first question is if we really, like, regardless of, and especially in the church, because I know we do this a lot, to where folks get beat down around like gender, sexuality, and all of that stuff. Like, if we can cast all of that out, and then we can really begin to show this radical love, then when it's 800 murders in the city, that means something is going to stop in me because I have this radical love. And then if I even look, and I'll be really quick on wrapping this up, like I took this Black aesthetics course, and it was like wrapped into a theological framework. But when we can love ourselves, and we can dismantle the images that we've internalized about ourselves. That means, and I'm gonna speak specifically to women now. When I no longer see that image of my sister as the loudmouth, aggressive person that I can't trust, but when I recreate that image of my sister, then I'm able to show you that radical love. And so we have to we have to embrace that notion of what radical love looks like in the movement.
Thank you so much, Sierra. Thank you. And our final word, our benediction, is Candace Castillo.
I heard the benediction. May the road rise to meet you real good. Y'all, so I'm gonna use this time to say we have a new attorney general. Breonna Taylor's mom did ask for our new attorney general, Merrick Garland, to look into her case and her murder. We need to do that. Part of Radical Black Love is supporting Black and Brown people in their fight. So also that means I support my Asian sisters who are going through it right now. Not because, not just because of yesterday's events, but because white supremacy and white patriarchy hurts us all, no matter the community. So right. We love you. I love you. Please hold your head, because that's how we get through this.
That's how we get through this. And as always, from last week to this week, just know our stories matter. Like, we have to keep saying that, like Candace said, our stories matter. We have to tell them all, because it gives somebody else the freedom to tell theirs. It gives somebody else a way to let somebody else in to find a cure for whatever is ailing them. Our stories matter. You are not alone. Thank you for uplifting Breonna Taylor and Tamika Palmer and that fight. And I would just say one thing, because I was like, okay, Merrick Garland is in there, and all of a sudden, everybody and their daddy want to start looking at how white supremacy has been embedded in the systems. And it's like, you never care until the weapon you created comes knocking back at your door. And so this space that we're in, there is a huge opportunity to make these truths plain and to give it all that we have and not back down and demand more. So thank you everyone that joined tonight. Thank you for beautiful panel. Thank you, Carmen at CTU Foundation, Michael, who's behind the scenes. I love you all. Have a blessed night and weekend. And we ready to get back out there. I love you all so much. Have a great evening.